Hey guys, we are here with Matt Newman, one of the key designers of Lord of the Rings LCG, and you just kind of wrapped up a questing event over here, the Stone of Eric, and it's supposed to be extra hard. We were talking earlier about like you were kind of surprised that people did pretty well at this thing. So before we dive into that, tell us like what is your role at Fantasy Fight? What do you do? What is your day to day at Fantasy Fight consist of for this Lord of the Rings game?
So I pretty much work full-time on Lord of the Rings. It's me and Caleb working on the Lord of the Rings projects, but we're kind of doing different things at the same time, but helping each other out. So I'm working on the Nightmare scenarios for the organized play kits that you've probably seen around.
Yeah, totally.
I'm also,
great, by the way.
Oh, awesome,
Yeah.
thank you. I also worked on this quest, the GenCon quest, and just a couple other projects here and there.
That's great. So, wait, is this a new thing for you? Are you also part, like, I know Caleb is kind of new, was brought in from the player base, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
And is that the same thing that happened to you? Were you around the same time?
Not around the same time. Caleb's been around for longer than me, but I was hired about 6 or 7 months ago.
Nice.
I also used to be a player. I've made some community cards on Board Game Geek and other sites like that. I was a very active member of the community. And I sent in my application and Fantasy Flight hired me. And it's been a blast.
Man, how is
Living the
that?
dream.
How has that truly been for you? Like, was it a moment of like shock and like this can't be real, or was it just like, sweet, I got a job doing what I love? Like, what was your reaction to that whole process?
Little column A, little column B. I mean,
Yeah.
I was kind of like, I didn't really expect to get the job. I mean, I was kind of like, I thought I could, like, I definitely was like, I could do this, I could totally do this.
Yeah.
So when I was hired, I was like, yeah, I was hired. But then I was like, really? Awesome. Yeah, I didn't expect it. And then, it was a big decision for me because I lived in New York at the time, and then I had to move all the way to Minnesota.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a life decision, and I was like, I got to do this. I have to do this. This is going to be
Cool.
awesome.
All right, man. Well, tell us about the event. What kind of decks? First of all, what is this quest deck designed around? Like, what did you want to do with the quest? And then, more importantly, how were players beating this thing? And were they doing it pretty consistently?
Yeah. So the Stone of Eric is you're going through the Hill of Eric is south of the White Mountains in Gondor. It's in Lamedon, and it's like sort of the outlands of Gondor, right? And you're traveling through, and the Lord of Lamedon is like, I can't find my son. He's been missing for days. So you're like, all right, we got to help this guy, right? So you go looking for him, and then you realize he's traveled to the Stone of Eric. And the Stone of Eric is not a nice place. It's where the Oathbreakers live. So it's super dangerous.
wow.
So you find out this is going to be bad. We gotta rescue this kid. So you're looking for Derufin, who's this kid that's lost in the Hill of Eric. And the theme of the quest is, it's different from Lake Town and Massing and Osgiliath, where you just start off like, bam!
Yeah.
You start off and it's super hard. This one is more of like a slow, steady suffocation, where like over time, you start off and you're like, oh, it's not that bad. You've got a few enemies, it's not that bad. But then it gradually becomes way, way worse. And the way that we do that is we have these objectives, eventide, dusk, and midnight. And it's like the time of night. And over time, they
Sweet.
advance from one to the other, and all of the encounter cards get powered up based on what time it is.
That is awesome.
So does it gives kind of a rush, like you don't want it to continue to spiral into like nighttime where things get worse and worse for you, that kind of a feeling?
Yeah, so like, when dusk gets revealed, you're like, oh no, everything. I've already seen a bunch of cards that are going to get way worse now if we see them again, and then when it gets to midnight, it's like, basically if it gets to midnight, you've got a couple turns.
Yeah.
Good luck, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
at that point in time, you're really like hard pressed. You gotta really win.
So what were the decks that were beating this thing? Like, were you surprised by the decks that you saw? Is this like decks that the players bring in and it's like, man, we didn't think about this in playtesting? Or is it like, we expected this? These are the strong decks that we thought could do this thing?
Well, we did see a few Outlands decks, which we expected, a lot of Dwarf decks, which we also expected. One thing is, with this scenario, you do need a decent amount of willpower to beat it, so we saw a lot of high willpower characters getting thrown on the table, Elrond, Glorfindel, that kind of thing. And I guess I'm not too surprised to see people beating it this quickly, but because it doesn't start off quite as hard. So like, you have that time to build up, but you have to really put the pressure on later on. So, but I think everyone really enjoyed it, and it's definitely still a really tough quest.
Cool.
What was the difficulty level that you would describe to it?
I don't think we set specific difficulty, but if I was gonna pick, I'd say like 8 or 9.
Whoa, so
Yeah,
pretty
it's
hard.
tougher
Yeah.
than Dol Guldur, I would say, but not as tough as Lake Town or Massing and Escalade. But
Nice.
still very, very tough.
Yeah, massing is crazy.
Yeah, massing is crazy, by the
There
way.
are some tricks in the encounter deck with this one where a lot of the enemies are spectral. Actually, all of the enemies are spectral, which is a new keyword that means that you have to use willpower to attack them.
Awesome.
So a lot of your old tricks with like Legolas and those kinds of characters,
they don't
Yeah.
work so
That's so cool. Man, that was really cool. All
Spirit
right,
decks through and through.
so let's
Yeah.
talk about like general. While we've got you here, we got to talk about general like Lord of the Rings design.
yep.
So, Robert and myself have a supreme dislike for the Outland stuff.
Okay.
I'm just gonna say it. Just the reason being, it's like, yeah, you throw all your stuff out, it gets better and awesome, and then you can just basically do whatever you want. There's not really a lot of holes in those decks that the encounter deck can exploit. So, what goes through your mind? Like, where does Outlands fit in like the grand scheme of your design? And is it going to change? Is it just going to kind of keep the same? Do you like it? Like, what's the scoop on the Outlands trait?
I like Outlands. It's kind of a different style where a lot of the other decks, you're going through and you're building this deck, and it's kind of complex. You have to find all these interactions between different cards that might not be too apparent. With Outlands, it's pretty much like we wanted to make a deck type that any player could sit down. They could buy Heirs of Numenor. They could buy a couple packs, and right from Stewart's Fury, you've got a deck,
Yeah.
And you can just, all you need to do is take all the cards that say Outlands, and you've got not only a good deck, but like a good deck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was sort of the plan from the get-go with them.
That makes a lot. That we had thought that
It was
might
like-
be the case.
Yeah,
you know?
I think at some point we had actually said it's like there's an entire deck literally in one box. It's like you're
pretty
ready
much.
to go.
Yeah, and I think players responded to that pretty well, where they
Yeah.
picked up Stewart's Fury, and they're like, wow, right from the box, this deck is good.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Cool.
I also feel like even though like it's a little bit less intensive on the deck building process. The beautiful thing about it, and you nailed it on the head, is like you can give it to a new player, or you can give it to your friend who's never played, and be like,
Yeah.
"Hey, come join us
Try this
Yeah,
thing.
in this
definitely.
quest." And
Yeah.
they're like, "I can do things, like I can help you guys," and that's
Yeah.
that's
and they'll
important.
see the synergy of the deck right there. They'll know exactly how this deck works.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's cool for that reason.
Yeah.
And also, and if you're a player who you want to find more really interesting interactions between cards and really like complex deck building, you can still go out there and do that, and you can still even include some of those Outlands cards.
Yeah, nice.
So
Cool. Well, I've got a question that I've been wanting to know from. I want to know from Caleb too. I didn't get a chance to ask him, but is there anything right now like on the list of things, like nothing planned, right? No, you're not going to do this. There's no plans, but like a scene or an event or a phase of Lord of the Rings that you really can't wait to one day like get your hands on and design. Like a battle that like is your favorite, like that you remember just being miraculous. Like for Robert, it's Gandalf throwing the flaming pine cones in the Hobbit.
Yeah,
Like,
up in the tree, just throwing pine cones down. on
he's
the
told me that
walls.
story like 1,000 times.
Yeah.
And so is there any moment like that you're just waiting to kind of explore in this game?
Oh, definitely, man. I mean, I love the books, and I reread the books all the time.
Yeah.
And now that we're doing the Saga expansions, that's awesome because it means that we can go and like revisit all of my favorite moments and all of Caleb's favorite moments in the books. So, I can't say specifically what you can expect to see in the future
Sure,
because
yeah.
you never know. But definitely, I love the Battle of Helm's Deep and the Battle of Pelennor Fields. Those big, epic battles.
Nice.
Can't wait to get to those. It's going to be really cool.
Awesome. Robert, you got any?
Along the personal anecdote type of thing, where does Lord of the Rings fit in your life? Because Caleb was talking to us, he started reading it when he was little, reread it kind of like you said over and over again. When did you start and what do you like most about it?
I think I read Hobbit the first time in elementary school.
Nice.
Or rather, it was read to me, but and from that moment on, I started reading The Lord of the Rings, and I was obsessed with it as a kid. I loved it. It was awesome, and I played D&D and stuff as a kid too. So
Yeah.
it was right up my alley. I just soaked it in, and then a few years passed, and I just reread it again as a teenager, and it just clicked. Like everything that I didn't get as a kid clicked. All of the big themes, all of the the character interactions, everything that I didn't understand. I was like, oh yay, elves, dwarves, swords, it's cool. When as a teenager, I realized this is a masterpiece. Like I just loved it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I reread it all the time, and I've always been a huge fan. I was a fan of Fantasy Flight Games before I got hired, and when Lord of the Rings got announced, I was thrilled because it was kind of putting two of my favorite things together: card games and my favorite book. Yeah. So, yeah, it just clicked.
Sweet. Well, the last thing that I really would like to know is what goes through your head when you're designing a Nightmare Quest, right? So like, obviously, there's a very thin line between this is impossible and this is a huge challenge and I might be able to do 1 out of 10 times.
Right.
So how do you like balance that challenge? How do you make that a thing that isn't broken or too easy, and just kind of, what's your process there?
It is hard to strike that balance. Honestly, the first thing I think about when I'm designing a nightmare scenario isn't really the difficulty. It's actually like, what can I do to this scenario that players might not expect, or like that they'll be happy to see, or like what's the natural evolution of this scenario? Yeah. So, for the Hunt for Gollum, for Nightmare Hunt for Gollum, I was like, what's the natural evolution of this scenario? Well, the enemies are hunting for Gollum too. They are the hunters, right? So they should be gathering clues, and that's pretty much where that went. And I do that for every scenario. I also look at player strategies to see like what decks did people use to defeat the scenario in the past. Is there a certain card or group of cards that made the scenario like kind of trivial because the scenario couldn't plan for them? And I try to counter that so that it kind of makes you feel like you're playing with an actual opponent. Where like if me and you were playing Warhammer Invasion, right, and I know what tricks you have up your sleeve, I might go home and change my deck so that I can defeat you. That's kind of what the Nightmare scenarios are trying to do.
Nice.
And then we do have a lot of external playtesters who have some wonderful feedback, and they say, this is too hard, or this is too easy. But for the most part, it's Nightmare. It should be hard.
It should be difficult. All right, Matt. Well, sweet. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Your work on Lord of the Rings, you and Caleb, it's been awesome. Like, we've been, the past, like I said, probably half year has been just money. So awesome. You guys are doing a great job. And
we look forward to more in the future.
Yeah,
totally.
We definitely will. Thank you guys for watching. This has been Matt, one of the great Lord of the Rings designers, and we will get you more from GenCon later this weekend.